On some rare occasions, we get something beautiful from a judge out of a court. And this is one of those occasions. Make sure and watch to the end. I got to do a little explanation to give you some background. And then we're going to jump into this judge absolutely ripping apart the Democrat Party bias and control of the mainstream media and the Supreme Court's capitulation to it. It's fantastic. Stick with me. I'm Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. I'm a lawyer, but I'm also a legal and political commentator here on YouTube. So if you like this type of stuff, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Don't miss any videos, especially this one. But you're already here, so I can't advertise for this one. Anyway, here's the headline, but I only grabbed this headline for this picture of this judge. Look at this guy. He is venerable, we'll say. He is venerable, and he is tired of the sort of media bias that's going on. He makes that very clear. But the headline is, Federal Judge Pens Dissent Slamming Decades-Old Press Protections. Now, he is being critical of the Supreme Court's decision in a case called New York Times versus Sullivan. A very brief background: an ad was taken out in the New York Times that accused police officers in the South of doing a bunch of stuff during the civil rights movement. Some of the stuff they did, some of the stuff they did not do. The lower courts awarded a bunch of damages to the chief of police, who is Sullivan, who sued the New York Times. That got overturned eventually at the Supreme Court level. And the Supreme Court said, in short, that there are two classes of people. There are regular private people, and then there are public figures. Now, at the time, it was public officials, but now that's been expanded out to include celebrities and other individuals in limited capacities as well. But basically, two classes of people: private people and public people. And it gave the leeway to people to criticize, even falsely criticize, public figures with near impunity, where they could not be punished for it. And the idea was to allow these publications to publish stories about wrongdoing and to get a few things wrong here and there without using defamation as a sledgehammer against the news media to prevent them from being able to cover these very pressing stories. And again, you got to remember the context of this is the civil rights movement. So that is where they did this. But the problem with New York Times versus Sullivan is they created law, constitutional law, that doesn't exist in the Constitution. And that is this multi-class of people having private versus public. That's entirely a fabrication of the Supreme Court, and having different standards of proof for those two people is made up. And more importantly, is no longer being used, it's being abused. And that's where this judge comes in. This case that he's talking about is about a newspaper allegedly lying about an oil company paying out bribes. Now, most of his dissent focuses on the majority. The majority in this case said the newspaper did not libel the oil company. He says that's crazy town. Of course they did. They can't prove anything, and they admitted that they had no evidence for their accusations. But that's all a separate topic. I'll be covering it on a live stream tonight, actually. We'll be going through this case because it's fascinating. However, this particular judge dropped at the final conclusion section of his dissent a blistering take on the media and the Supreme Court. And that's what we're going to look at right now in this video. So let's start reading. Now, I'm going to try and read this as accurately as possible, but there's some stuff I'll have to interject a word here and there to talk about how he's using citations to make points, okay? So he says, one can understand, if not approve, the Supreme Court's policy-driven decision in New York Times, where he's talking about them wanting to protect northern media outlets to cover civil rights abuses in the South without fear of defamation. So that's the policy he's talking about. There can be no doubt that the New York Times case has increased the power of the media, although although the institutional press, it could be argued, needed that protection to cover the civil rights movement, that power is now abused. In light of today's very different challenges, I doubt the court would invent the same rule. As the case has been subsequently interpreted, it allows the press to cast false aspersions on public figures with near impunity. It would be one thing if this were a two-sided phenomenon. And he cites to a case saying, reasoning that the press will publish the responses of public officials to reports or accusations. But he contrasts that with this other piece, the culture of mistrust in American politics, noting that the press more often manufactures scandals involving political conservatives. The increased power of the press is so dangerous today because we are very close to one-party control of these institutions. Our court was once concerned about the institutional consolidation of the press leading to a bland and homogeneous marketplace of ideas. It turns out that ideological consolidation of the press, helped along by economic consolidation, is the far greater threat. Although the bias against the Republican Party, not just controversial individuals, is rather shocking today, this is not new. It is a long-term secular trend going back at least to the 70s. I do not mean to defend or criticize the behavior of any particular politician, he says. Two of the three most influential papers, at least historically, the New York Times and the Washington Post, are virtually Democratic Party broadsheets, and the news section of the Wall Street Journal leans in the same direction. The orientation of these three papers is followed by the Associated Press and most large papers across the country, such as the Los Angeles Times, Miami Herald, and Boston Globe. Sounds like a swamp, doesn't it? Nearly all television, network, and cable is a Democratic Party trumpet. Even the government-supported National Public Radio follows along. This guy is taking he's pulling no punches here. No punches. As has become apparent, Silicon Valley also has an enormous influence over the distribution of news, and it similarly filters news delivery in ways favorable to the Democrat Party. See Tiffany's piece, Twitter goofed it, from The Atlantic in 2020. Quote, within a few hours, Facebook announced that it would limit a New York Post story's spread on its platform while its third-party fact-checkers somehow investigated the information. Soon after, Twitter took an even more dramatic stance. Without immediate public explanation, it completely banned users from posting the link to the story. And of course, you guys already know what they're talking about. It's the Hunter Biden laptop story that was absolutely suppressed by the mainstream media. It was suppressed by Twitter. It was suppressed by Facebook. They did not want that story coming out before the 2020 election because they knew what would happen. They knew how that story would play out, and they wanted control. We know about this, of course, from the Time magazine article where they flat out admitted there was a full-on press for media control. And I've got the video right up above me here, probably over here. You can click on that if you want to see how the Time article actually explains this. It is a fascinating story. But he says, it is well accepted that viewpoint discrimination raises the specter that the government may effectively drive certain ideas or viewpoints from the marketplace, but ideological homogeneity in the media or in the channels of information distribution risks repressing certain ideas from the public consciousness just as surely as if access were restricted by the government. Woo! Media bias, media homogeneity, and bias. That's the two part of it. You know, if one media place is biased towards another, who cares? If all of the media is marching in lockstep with a political party, that's where the danger comes in, and it is just as bad as if the government is approving the news itself, he says. And that is a beautiful take. A beautiful take. Put this guy on the Supreme Court, except he's already aged. Put him up there and have him team up with Thomas and rip this stuff apart, because it is time. It is time for a reform of these ideas and a clarification from the Supreme Court. Elsewhere in the decision, he flat out calls out the court's reluctance to make the law better. And it's great. It's great. But I wanted to let you know about this story. And let's be very clear. Media bias is very real. Media has an agenda to control the nature of U.S. politics, and they have been working on it for decades. This guy has been watching it clearly for decades, and he thinks it's time to stop, and the court doesn't need to be providing shields for the media to run a political agenda as an agitprop arm of the Democrat Party. Do you agree? Drop a comment down below and let me know. I like this guy. I love this opinion. It's fantastic. And like I said, I'm going to be going through it on a live stream later tonight. And if you want to check that out, hit the subscribe button so you know when it happens. Talk to you soon. Peace. Peace.